Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. Hello, welcome back to the show. If you are listening to this in real time, then I hope you're spending a very relaxing and enjoyable holiday and that you're taking some time to just take care of yourself. And if you're also listening to this in real time, then I would also like to let you know about my brand new intuitive eating challenge that I will be hosting starting January 5th until January 12th. This is something I have been working on in secret for a couple of weeks now, and I'm so excited to bring this to you guys, this free 7-day challenge where I'm going to guide you through the initial essential first steps towards becoming an intuitive eater. So if you're someone who has finally come to terms with the fact that you no longer want to diet, you've recognized the damage that dieting has done on your physical and mental health, and you want to learn how to become an intuitive eater, but you feel lost, you feel confused, you feel overwhelmed, you don't know where to start, then this challenge is perfect for you. So if you want to sign up, you can go to the link in my show notes, or you can follow the URL, sabrinamagna.com/challenge, and you can sign up for free there, and then you will get your welcome email and all of the steps you'll need to know about to make the most of this challenge. All right, so let's get into today's topic. Today we're going to talk about the 4 eating personalities. So when I was struggling with my relationship with food, I was pretty unaware of how problematic my behaviors were. I knew that it wasn't normal for me to think about food 24/7. I knew that I didn't behave in the same way around food than most of my friends and family. And I remember looking at the people around me and thinking, God, I wish I could just eat like them. I wish I could just eat and not overthink it and just move on and not think about it for the rest of the day. But I could never put my finger on what exactly my issues were. I didn't fall under the stereotypical category of an eating disorder. I wasn't severely underweight. I wasn't constantly purging, even though it did happen on some occasions. But if you looked at me, you wouldn't see someone whose entire life revolved around food because I was good at hiding it. But I knew deep down that this was no way to live. And I knew deep down that it was not normal for me to constantly live in this mental food and weight prison. And as I mentioned when I was first starting this podcast, I wanted to structure these episodes in a way that I wish I had been presented these issues when I was struggling and give you a resource that I didn't have. And putting some thought into that, I knew what I needed to talk about today, and that is the 4 eating personality types. Like I said, I knew I wasn't a normal eater back then, but what I didn't know is that there are actually many types of eating styles that are disordered and are unconscious forms of dieting. And the thing about the diet mentality is that it's so commonplace. It is everywhere. Everywhere you look around you, someone is dieting. And if they're not officially on a diet, they have that ingrained diet mentality. When I start working with my clients, we go through a process of learning how to recognize diet language and dieting traits. And within a couple of days, they all come back to me with the same thoughts, which is, oh my God, it is mind-blowing to me how much I'm recognizing how much people talk about dieting and food and weight. They start recognizing that in just regular conversations with people at work or friends or family, it's all that people talk about. Perhaps you are still dieting and you don't know it. And what I see very often is that people feel the symptoms of a deeper issue. So they feel the symptoms of binging, overeating, emotional eating, food guilt, and they feel all of these symptoms, but they don't know what the root cause of it is. It's like when you feel the headache or you feel the pain, you feel something going on in your body, but you don't actually know what disease is causing it. And so there's a good chance that maybe you're feeling all of these symptoms right now, and you think that the root cause of this is because there's something wrong with you, because you are genetically addicted to food, or because you just have no willpower, or you're weak, or whatever it is, without understanding that there is a root cause of this that is much deeper, that is outside of your control, and that is dieting. So many of the members of Food Freedom Academy thought that they were no longer on a diet. They had given up on dieting. They had tried so many things and failed that they were kind of at that F it stage. But after joining the program and going through some of the assessments that we have in the academy, they realized that they were still in fact dieting, even if they didn't know it. And the reason why it's so important to be able to know yourself and to know the obstacles standing in your way of finding true freedom is that trying to become an intuitive eater while still being stuck in the diet mentality is like trying to drive a car with both the brake and the gas on. You won't get very far. So you may have that desire to have freedom from these obsessive thoughts about food, to be able to eat like a quote unquote normal person again. But if you have that diet mentality, that brake is still on, and you are going to keep feeling like you're hitting the wall, making you feel frustrated and overwhelmed and wanting to give up on intuitive altogether. So if you feel like you might not be officially dieting, maybe you're not officially on Weight Watchers or keto or calorie counting or intermittent fasting, whatever it is, but you have a set of rules about what you can and can't eat, making it impossible to eat normally without second guessing everything that you're eating. If you avoid certain foods at all costs, like carbs or sweets, if you feel out of control the second that you eat a quote unquote bad food, so one cookie leads to the entire box, if you feel guilty when you break the rules that you've set for yourself. So example of food rules are not eating after 8 p.m., you can only eat carbs once a day, you can only have sweets on holidays. These are all example of food rules. And in the academy, I work with my clients to help identify every single one of the rules that you've accumulated through dieting. Because if you've jumped from one diet to another, you know that every diet, every fitness or nutrition expert out there has a different set of rules that you need to follow. And then you end up accumulating all of these rules so that over time, it just feels like your entire life is food rules. And so we end up breaking all of those down, understanding where they come from, and learning how to break those rules in a systematic way without causing stress or overwhelm, so that you can actually have more freedom and you can eat without feeling that guilt and anxiety. And this episode is going to open your eyes to the eating personality that you might have. And once you uncover what eating personality you have, then it will become so much easier for you to start crafting a plan so that you can start developing a more healthy and beneficial style of eating that will foster better physical and emotional health. So every day I get messages on social media and emails from women telling me that they have complicated issues with food. They tell me that they have a really hard time stopping to eat when they're full. They can't trust themselves around food. They feel afraid and anxious at social events when food is involved. They think about it 24/7. And then I ask if they have a history of dieting or food restrictions. And they all have the same response, which is, oh my God, how'd you know? I've done Weight Watchers, I've done keto, I've done everything under the sun. Like you name it, I've tried it. And the thing about dieting is that it's not a one and done type of thing. It leaves a lasting and deep mark on the way that you relate to food. And that's why when you have this complicated issue with food and you try to fix it by just throwing a Band-Aid on, like calorie counting or meal planning or following these rules about what you can or can't eat, it doesn't address the root cause of the issue, which is dieting in the first place. So unconscious dieting is usually done under the guise of health. We think that we're doing it because we're trying to be health conscious, but really there's usually an undertone of weight loss desires there. And that manifests as obsessive eating habits that end up being detrimental to your overall physical and mental health. Now, it's important to say that there's a fine line between eating for health and dieting. And in today's episode, I'm going to break down the different forms of dieting and eating personalities to help you see where you are at now so you can move towards a way of healthy eating that feels natural and flexible and enjoyable and that doesn't require you to obsess over food. So let's get into it. There's 4 personality types, and those personality types were determined by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, who are the original intuitive eating dietitians who developed the framework back in 1995. So I will give credit to the ones who kind of discovered those personality types. As we break them all down, it's important to remember that you might relate to one, or you might relate to 2 or 3 of them, but there's probably going to be one that's going to resonate the most with you. So the first personality type we're going to talk about is the careful eater. So careful eaters are those people who tend to be hyper vigilant about what foods that they put in their bodies. So on the surface, they might look like someone who is a perfect eater, who's just like very health conscious, who likes to focus on healthy foods and exercise. And on the outside, it does not seem problematic at all. But internally, they have a very unhealthy fight between their brain and their stomach, and they have a hidden tumultuous relationship with food. I was definitely a careful eater during the phase in my life when I was struggling with orthorexia, which is this unhealthy relationship with being healthy. So some signs of careful eaters is that you worry about every single bite of food that you allow into your body. You go to the grocery store and you overanalyze food labels and look at the ingredients and compare one food to another and make sure that you're only getting the best possible food. Going out to restaurants can feel very stressful. You want to know everything that is going to be in your food, how it's been prepared. You want to make sure that there's no fat, no oil. You tend to also undereat. So you are very, very rigid about what foods you're eating, how much you're eating them. You might track your food, weigh your food, pre-portion your food to make sure that you're not overeating. You are constantly planning out your next meal. You're constantly thinking and worrying about what you're going to eat next. And like I said, I was this kind of eater. And another very common pattern in this personality type is that you will eat very, very good for a whole week or a couple of weeks. Or if you're at the later stages of dieting, it's only going to be a couple of days. And then you will try to make up for that sense of deprivation with indulging in cheat meals or splurges. And the problem with this type of personality style is it becomes nearly impossible to fully participate in life and enjoy spontaneous experiences because you are so overly worried about your diet or your exercise routine that it becomes all-consuming. And this type of personality style can turn into anorexia. It could also turn into orthorexia, and it can result in chronic food guilt, a lack of self-worth, a lack of self-esteem, obsessive thoughts about food, and undereating, which is very bad for your health. When we talk about undereating, there is no one set number of calories or carbs or whatever it is that will qualify as undereating for everyone. You can't generalize that. So if you're someone who is tracking your calories and you don't think that you are under eating because perhaps you're eating 1,500 calories or 1,800 calories and you really think, well, that should be enough, it might not be. it really depends on your body and your activity level and your exercise routine and what your body needs and your lifestyle. So it's very important to eat in a way that is accordance to your body's needs. So that's why I always recommend working with someone, because it's hard to know when you're stuck in your own mindsets and in your own body what your blind spots are. And another problem about careful eating is that it can result in a loss of social life and it can affect your relationship. This was definitely a factor for me when I was in university. When I got my Fitbit, I became obsessive about being able to track all of my steps, aka I was able to track how many calories I was burning every single day. And because I was inputting everything into my Fitness Pal, I was also able to track every calorie I was eating. And it was during this time that I isolated myself the most, because I didn't want to go to restaurants, because I was so obsessed about making sure that everything in my food was healthy and I knew every single ingredient. And the thought of going to a restaurant and not being able to make my own food and not knowing how many calories were going to be in there, or being afraid of losing control and overeating, that caused so much anxiety for me that I just stayed home. And the ironic thing is that I would stay home because I was scared of overeating, but then I would end up being so sad about staying home that I would binge at home instead. But because of this reason, you stop wanting to see friends, you stop wanting to see people, and it does make it very difficult to hold relationships and let alone date. Because for me, the thought of dating someone and having to eat around that person and letting that person make me food, that also caused me so much anxiety. So during those years, I also didn't really date. And so I want to make it clear that there's nothing wrong with being interested in the well-being of your body. And actually, intuitive eating is the best thing that you can do for the well-being of your body. Because when you overly obsess over the food that you're eating, it starts affecting your ability to have a healthy relationship with food, and it negatively impacts your body. Because at the time when I thought that I was doing all this in the name of health, what I didn't realize was how negatively it was impacting my health. My hormones were all out of whack. I lost my period. I was starting to lose my hair. It was thinning out. My nails were brittle. My skin was dry. My metabolism was shot. I was exhausted all the time. And I didn't look at all of those symptoms as a symptom of this unhealthy obsession with being healthy. And so careful eaters, when you really look deeply into it, it is just a subtle dieting type. And so when you're a careful eater, you might not be officially on a diet, but you scrutinize every food situation. So that is the first personality type. And that brings us to the second one, which is the professional dieter. And those are definitely easier to identify. They're perpetually dieting. They've jumped from one diet to another. They've tried every fad diet, diet book, weight loss gimmick. They've done keto, Weight Watchers, shakes, detoxes, meal plans, trainers. Sometimes the dieting doesn't necessarily have an official name, but it takes place in subtle forms like fasting or cutting back or eating clean. A lot of people doing intermittent fasting hold a strong stance that they aren't dieting, that it's a lifestyle. And if you are someone who's trying to be weary of diet culture right now, just know that it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle is the most popular coined term by diet culture, because they've picked up on the fact that people know now that dieting doesn't work, that it's detrimental. And so they're trying to rebrand themselves. Professional dieters know a lot about portions and calories and diet hacks and healthier alternatives. But the reason that they're always on a diet is that the original one didn't work. Or should I say worked temporarily, but it never works permanently. And when we talk about working, we might mean weight loss, but at the same time affecting your mental health, your self-esteem, and your physical health. The thing about the professional dieter is that she could probably write her own book on dieting. That's how much nutrition information that she has. She's part of the Facebook group. She's read the books. She has accumulated so much knowledge and so much information from 100 different sources that what she experiences is analysis paralysis. It's, I technically know what I should be doing. I'm just not doing it. Professional dieters do resemble careful eating traits. The difference is that chronic dieters guide every eating choice for the sake of losing weight, not necessarily for health. And when the professional dieter is not officially on a diet, she's thinking about the next diet that she's going to start and wakes up hoping that it's going to be a quote unquote good day, that she has enough willpower to say no to temptations. It's also not unusual for professional dieters to struggle with binging or engage in last supper eating, which is, I'm going to eat as much food as I can now because I've already done something bad. I've also already broken my rule. So I'm just going to screw it, eat everything, and then start again tomorrow. And the most common trait of the professional dieter is that they go through the same vicious dieting cycle, which I actually talked about in detail in the last episode. So if you haven't listened yet, then you can go back to the last episode where I talk about how to break free from the diet cycle of diet, lose weight, fall off the wagon, binge, gain the weight back to dieting. The problem with this eating style is that number one, it never leads to better physical or mental health in the long run. It is extremely hard to live this way. Yo-yo dieting makes it increasingly difficult to lose weight or even to maintain a healthy weight over time because, as we talked about in past episodes, the more you diet, the slower your metabolism gets, the better your body gets at holding on to calories and energy, the more it learns to retain fat, and also the more cravings you get and the more binges you get, because chronic undereating or food restrictions usually results in overeating and binges. For some professional dieters, the frustration of losing weight becomes so intense that they resort to dangerous and extreme ways of trying to lose weight, like pills and 1,200 calorie diets and extremely low carb, or things like keto, which was never meant to be for weight loss in the first place. It's a diet that was developed for people with epilepsy. It was never meant to be a diet or sustained long term. And so professional dieting can turn into a very dangerous way of living. And it can also turn into severe eating disorders like anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder. A study found that by the time that dieters reach the age of 15, they're 8 times as likely to suffer from an eating disorder than non-dieters. So important statistics to keep in mind for anyone who has children, because children model the behaviors of their parents. We also know that yo-yo dieting has been shown to increase your risk of heart disease and premature death. So I have so much compassion for people who have fallen into the trap of yo-yo dieting, because when we are in that moment where we feel so uncomfortable in our bodies, we don't like the way that we look, the way that we feel, we want that instant relief. We want something that's going to make us feel better, and we want it to feel better now. And so we go for the quick fixes, we go for the fad diets, and we do get that instant sense of gratification when we see that weight loss and we feel like we're on the right path. But it is so important to think about the long term. Is this something that I can do when I'm 80 years old? Is this the way that I still want to be living, tracking my calories or cutting out all the foods that I love? And is this going to lead to better health in the long run? How is this going to affect my eating mindset and my eating habits in the long run. It's so important to look at the future and take a long-term view of the things that we do in the moment. Now, the third eating style is the unconscious eater. The thing about unconscious eaters is that there's actually 4 subtypes. So there's the chaotic unconscious eater, the refuse not unconscious eater, the waste not unconscious eater, and the emotional unconscious eater. The unconscious eater is often eating while doing something else at the same time, like watching TV, reading, scrolling through their phone, working. And because of the subtleness and the lack of awareness, it can be difficult for a person to identify this eating personality. So the chaotic unconscious eater is often living in a very busy and overscheduled life. They have so much on their plate, too many things to do. They're just eating whatever is quick, whatever they can grab, vending machines, fast food, whatever they can get their hands on. And this type of chaotic eater will often go long periods without eating because they're too busy or they forget, which ends up leading to overeating because when we go a long period without eating, our body is lacking that necessary fuel. And this is something we talk about in the academy, going on the hunger scale. When we get to a 1 or a 2 on the hunger scale where you're literally so hungry that you could eat anything in sight, then you end up rebounding to the other side of the hunger scale, which is a 9 or a 10, where you eat so much, not because you lack willpower or self-control, but because your body is trying to compensate for that lack of food. So that is the chaotic unconscious eater. The refuse not unconscious eater is someone who, whether they're hungry or not, they will never say no to food. So if there's food lying around at meetings or on the kitchen counter or free food, they will never pass it up. And most of the time, this type of eater is not aware of what they're eating or how much they're eating. They're just eating because food is there without actually asking themselves, am I hungry? Do I really want this food? And one major characteristic of this type of eating is that social outings that revolve around food are especially tough. Buffets, cocktail parties, especially all-you-can-eat buffets, because they have a hard time listening to their bodies and stopping when they're full, because if the food is there, they're going to eat it no matter what. So the waste not unconscious eater pretty much has the name in it. They don't want to waste their food. They want to get as much food as they can for their money. So all you can eat buffets, you can bet your bottom dollar that they're going to eat as much as they can, even if they're so stuffed that they can't button their pants anymore. They usually come from the Clean the Plate Club, have a hard time leaving food on their plate, even if they're hungry. And it's really not unusual for this type of eater to eat foods off of their kid's plate, off of their husband's plate, even if they're not hungry anymore, just because it's there and they don't want to throw it out. And in the program, this is something that we actually have to work through with my clients, is how to get rid of the clean the plate mentality, because this is something that can be ingrained in you if you grew up in that type of family. And the issue with that kind of mindset is that it disregards your hunger and fullness cues. It tunes you out from listening to your body, and it makes actually your eating experience very unenjoyable because you end up overeating and kind of ruining your entire experience. A good example is when I used to go to the restaurant, I had a really hard time stopping when I was full because I had spent the money, I was there, I wanted to eat as much as I can. And because of that, I would end up ruining my restaurant experiences because I would walk away feeling so full and so sick. And if I had stopped eating a couple of bites earlier, I would have walked away having enjoyed my meal and really been present and felt good. But because I had such a hard time listening to my body, and a lot of it was driven by my mindset, it would taint my whole experience. And then the final type of unconscious eater is a very common one that I see in the women I work with, which is the emotional unconscious eater. That is when you use food to cope with emotions, especially uncomfortable emotions, but it could also be happy emotions. But we turn to food when we're stressed, angry, lonely, even happy. We use food as a celebration. And emotional eaters will think that eating is their problem. They will see overeating and binging as their problem when it's often the symptom of a deeper issue. And that's why emotional eating, we have a whole module on that in the academy where we really deconstruct it all, because the thing about emotional eating is that it's not the eating the problem. It's that people don't know how to deal with negative emotions. We live in a society where we are constantly trying to numb ourselves or distract ourselves instead of actually feeling what we're feeling. We're so scared of feeling negative emotions. We think that they're going to destroy us. And so we have a full training called learning how to feel negative emotions, because when you stop being afraid of feeling boredom or feeling loneliness, and when you find more productive ways of coping with those intense emotions, then eating will no longer be your only and primary coping mechanism. It might remain one of them, and that's okay. We learn not to demonize emotional eating, because the more we demonize it, the more guilt and shame we feel, the lower our self-esteem is. And we know that no positive change comes out of guilt and shame. And I definitely want to do more episodes on emotional eating, because this is something that we talk about for a couple of weeks in the program, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of different steps. We have 6 steps that we go through to learn how to properly navigate emotional eating. Some example of behaviors that the emotional unconscious eater might do is it can range from grabbing a candy bar when you're stressed out, or chronic compulsive binges of a lot of food every time you feel those negative emotions, which is a way to really just numb and distract yourself. And a lot of the times what we do is we actually end up inflicting more pain onto us through these binges to not feel the pain of whatever negative emotion we're trying to not feel. The problem with the unconscious eating style is that it usually results in chronic overeating, which can result because you are either unaware of it, right? So you have a hard time listening to your body. You are so distracted or doing other things that you don't pay attention to your body. This is also the phenomenon where it's like, oh, it's all gone, where you're eating on your couch, you've got your hands in that bag of chips, and before you know it, your hand gets to that bottom of the bag and you're like, oh my God, how did I just eat this entire thing? And it's a lack of awareness. Mindless eating is something that I hear from the women in my community super often, because mindless eating is an automatic pattern. A lot of us live life on autopilot. 90 to 95% of our behaviors are going to be automated. So if most of your eating happens on autopilot, then there's a good chance that you are not actually going to taste your food. You're not actually going to enjoy your food, and you're more likely to overeat because you're not paying attention to how the food is responding inside your body. There's different levels of unconscious eating, but one thing that I've seen is this kind of altered state of eating called fog eating, where you're not aware of what is being eaten, why you started eating, or even how that food tastes. This is like zoning out with food. So the problem with these 3 eating personality types is that eventually, whether it's in a matter of weeks or months or years, it will always become an ineffective way of eating and living. Even on the surface, short term, it appears okay. Over time, the same pattern repeats itself time and time again. You go through periods of careful eating, following your rules, staying on track, very proud of yourself, until something happens, a stressful day, a holiday, birthday, special event, and you blow it. But the blowing it is never just the one slice of cake or the one slice of pizza. You end up eating uncontrollably because, number one, you've lost your ability to respect your fullness cues. Another side effect of dieting, you probably have a hard time listening to your body because you've been so used to listening to other people. You also have this restrictive mindset. So because you've broken your rule, you tell yourself you'll just eat as much as you can now, start again tomorrow. And then you end up punishing yourself by going back to even more careful eating the next day, which restarts this cycle all over again. Again, something that I detailed in the last episode, how to break free from the diet cycle. And the trap that dieters get caught in is that instead of understanding that the entire framework of dieting and restriction is the cause of this whole mess, they blame themselves or the specific diet that they were on at the time. Oh, keto was just not the right fit for me, but maybe intermittent fasting will be. Oh, Weight Watchers didn't work because I didn't like going to the meetings, but if I do calorie counting, that I can do it at home. Or we blame ourselves. I didn't have the willpower, I wasn't determined enough, I didn't have the time, or it wasn't my priority, whatever it is, without really recognizing that 95% of diets fail within 3 to 5 years, and that 5% of people who do manage to keep that weight off live the rest of their life in fear of gaining that weight back, and they end up just living a half life because they're constantly in their head about what food they shouldn't be eating. So when we're blaming ourselves or we're blaming the diet we're on instead of blaming the whole framework of dieting, we think that the solution is just to try harder on a new diet. At first, this new diet is exciting. We are hopeful. We think, okay, this time is going to be different. And it's not. Eventually, the weight comes back and dieting gets harder and harder to maintain over time. And every time you come back to your baseline eating personality, it feels more uncomfortable and more of a struggle than ever before. And this is because with each diet, the rules that we talked about, the food rules that we accumulate, they get stronger, they get louder, and they perpetuate these feelings of guilt about eating, even if you're not officially on the diet, because these food rules get so deeply ingrained in our subconscious that if you don't learn how to work through those food rules and eliminate them, you're always going to feel that guilt and that anxiety when you eat. So if you are someone who wants to be able to eat without tracking or constantly being on and off the wagon, you want to be able to trust your body and eat a wide variety of foods that are both healthy and nourishing for your body, but also foods that you love, that are more fun, that might not be the most nutrient dense, but you can eat them and have a little bit and move on and not overthink it, then that kind of eating personality coincides with an intuitive eater. So that is the fourth eating personality type. Intuitive eaters have unconditional permission to eat. No rules, no restrictions, no calorie counts, no macro counting. You and only you get to call the shots on what feels good for your body and for yourself. If you notice that you're someone who just feels overall better with higher protein intake or lower carbs or lower fat or whatever it is, whatever style of eating feels the best for you, you adopt because you enjoy the way it makes you feel, because it gives you energy, because it's something that you can maintain and you're doing it for health reasons, as opposed to doing it because that is what someone else told you to do, because you're doing it from a place of guilt, from a place of wanting to lose weight at all cost. So the intuitive eater eats by listening to their internal cues of hunger and fullness rather than those external cues of how many calories I should be eating or what time of the day I should be eating or the carb content or pre-measured portions. An example of an intuitive eater is choosing to have a pizza for lunch because they feel like it and that's what they're craving, and then choosing to have a salad for dinner because they're craving something a little bit lighter and that's the thing that they want to eat. Another example of intuitive eating is actually something that happened to me just recently. I was going to my parents' house and they had made this really delicious dinner, and my mom had made these chocolate lava cakes for dessert, which I absolutely love. And I was at their place and I ended up developing a very random stomach ache. I just had uncomfortable cramps. ate dinner, and I thought that maybe it's just because I was hungry, but it didn't actually end up helping. And so after dinner, my mom takes out the desserts, and I just decided I'm not going to eat it because it's not going to make me feel good. And in the past, I would have definitely eaten it, even if my stomach was hurting, even if I was full, because in my mind, I would have thought, well, this is a special occasion. I'm at my mom's place. I don't usually allow myself to bake desserts at home or have desserts at home because I used to not bake at home because I was so terrified of having that food in my house and losing control and binging. So I would only allow myself to eat desserts or have sweets at special occasions or in someone else's house. But in that moment, because I knew that I can have that food whenever I want and there are no diets starting again tomorrow, that this is not a special occasion for me to eat these foods, I had no problem just choosing not to have it and watching my family enjoy it. And I was happy for them that they would enjoy it, but I didn't have that sense of envy or FOMO that I wasn't eating it because I was making that choice for myself of what I knew that my body needed. And the thing about intuitive eating, as I'm describing this, you might be able to think of someone right now in your life that is the perfect embodiment of intuitive eating. They eat when they're hungry and they stop when they're full. They don't have a hard time leaving food on their plate. They don't try to cut out certain foods for the sake of weight loss, like things high in carbs or fat or sugar. They allow themselves to have foods when they crave it. They trust their bodies to know when to eat, what to eat. They don't overthink it all the time. And yet, they don't struggle with food. They don't struggle with their health. It's something that comes naturally to them. I know for me, I used to look at people in my life who were classic embodiments of intuitive eating, which I didn't know at the time what intuitive eating even was. But I remember just thinking, I wish that I could just eat like them. How can they possibly eat like that? And here's the pretty ironic thing, is that we are all born intuitive eaters. It is a natural human condition. We are born as natural intuitive eaters because when we are born, we have this innate wisdom around food if we don't interfere with it. We don't eat based on dieting rules or health. When we're a toddler, we're not counting our calories. We're not having someone tell us to stop eating carbs unless you were very unlucky and you grew up with parents who were dieting and put you on a diet at a very young age. But if you don't interfere with a toddler's eating style, they will end up eating a wide variety of food if you give them access to it. On one day, they might have strawberries and grapes for breakfast, and the next day they'll be craving Nutella, and then the day after that they'll be craving toast with peanut butter and bananas. On a long-term basis, their eating food choices will end up balancing out. They will eat when they're hungry and they will stop when they're full. Think of babies. When they are hungry, they cry until they get milk, and then when they're full, they just turn their head and they stop eating. It is not a problem for my nieces or nephews to leave half of their pieces of cake on the plate, even if it was delicious and they enjoyed every single bite, because they don't want to get a stomach ache. They know it doesn't feel good. There is actually a study done by Duke University psychologist Philip Constanzo, who found that school-age children who struggle with excess weight, who are overweight and struggle with food, that was highly associated with the degree at which their parents try to control their eating. So that means that the more you try to control your child's eating, even if it comes from a really good place, you're worried about their health, you're worried about their weight, the more you try to interfere with someone's eating by restricting their portions or only turning them towards quote unquote good food, making them feel bad about eating unhealthy food, the more you try to interfere with a child's natural eating cues, the problem will get worse, not better. There was another study done by a therapist and dietitian who showed that if you can get parents of overweight kids to back off and let them eat without the pressure and the control, that kid will eventually end up eating less. Why? Because that child is going to stop following all of these external cues of what their parent is telling them to eat, and they're going to be able to start hearing and understanding their own inner signals of hunger and fullness and what feels good. And if they know that that bag of chips or that cake can be available whenever they want, then they won't feel that urgency to eat as much as they can in one sitting. They're going to be able to eat, stop when they're full, knowing that if they want to have it again tomorrow, they can. And when you have that autonomy to make choices for yourself, it's very easy to take care of yourself and to honor your health because you can meet all of your food needs, which means taste, satisfaction, enjoyment, nourishment in a way that feels good. You actually look forward to eating and you feel well when you do it. You're able to feel healthy and nourished and strong without having to rely on any willpower or motivation. In the program, we have an assessment at the very beginning to help you see which areas of your relationship with food maybe need the most work based on an examination of your intuitive eating abilities or lack thereof. This includes your ability to eat and feel at peace with all foods without stress. So if you try to avoid certain foods like carbs or sweets or high calorie things, or you label foods as good and bad, you maybe need some work in those areas. This assessment also includes your tendency to turn to food for emotional reasons. So if you're someone who often copes with negative emotions by turning to food, this might be a category that needs some more work. And finally, this assessment includes your ability to listen to your bodies. So those are the 4 eating personality types: the careful eater, the professional dieter, the unconscious eater, and the intuitive eater. Now, if you're listening to this and you feel like you have such a long way to go because you don't feel like an intuitive eater, maybe you've been dieting your entire life, I want you to know that it does not matter how long you've dieted, how many things you've tried, or how broken or a lost cause you feel. This is possible for absolutely everyone because you are born as an intuitive eater. It is your right as a human being, and it is absolutely possible for anyone to recapture that ability. There is a process to go through. There is 12 steps that we talk about in the program. And a lot of the times you have to make sure that you're doing it in the right order, because if you, for example, start taking on gentle nutrition too early, it can start to feel like a restrictive diet. So you have to work on healing your relationship with food and working on your body image. And if you struggle with exercise, you also have to work on healing your relationship with exercise. There's so many different pieces. But no matter what, with the right kind of process and support, it absolutely is possible to become an intuitive eater. I have worked with women who had been dieting since they were 12 years old and they were in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they were able to find peace with food. So no matter what, do not lose hope. It is possible for you too. So if you want to learn how to start your journey towards intuitive eating, but you don't know where to start, this is exactly why I created my 7-day free intuitive eating challenge that is starting in January 2023. So depending on when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it in real time, then you still have that chance to go and sign up. It is absolutely free. We are going to have live coaching Zoom sessions with me personally. I'm going to have Q&A sessions where you're going to get to ask me questions. We are going to have workbooks, a private Facebook group, bonus sessions. It's going to be so much fun. And we already have so many people signed up. I am really excited for this. So if you want to sign up, you can go to the link in the show notes, sabrinamangao.com/challenge, and I'll see you on the inside. Thank you so much for listening. I am so incredibly grateful for every single one of you listening. 2022 has been an amazing year. I'm so excited to go into 2023 with so many new projects, exciting things for you guys. So enjoy the end of the year, and I will see you in 2023. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magna Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.